All right, it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So thank you for joining and spending part of your afternoon with us. We will try to keep it as exciting as possible. I know it's after lunch, so we don't want any after lunch nappers. As many of you know, data and analytics and incorporating the voice of the customer is a rising topic in the association industry. And based on the audience today, it remains a hot topic and something we're certainly excited to talk about. Today's webinar is hosted by Association Analytics and Propfuel. A few guidelines real quick. Really, we're pretty liberal, so there's not really many. What we do encourage is you to ask questions and interact throughout the webinar. There's a chat feature, so please at any time, if you want us to expand on anything or have a question, put it up there in the chat, and we will stop and respond to those throughout. So today we'll be covering different ways to leverage data to drive engagement. So you can put a face with the name. Let me introduce myself first. Here I am, Julie Sheilo, CEO of Association Analytics. I've been passionate about data and analytics since I was little, ever since I can remember. And my mission in this industry is really to change the way that we're doing business. I want to provide the tools and resources to allow all of you to make data-driven decisions that really drive your mission. Before all this stuff was too expensive for many associations, which is why Association Analytics launched Acumen, which is a data and analytics platform built for associations and nonprofits. But we're not here to talk about us. We're here to talk about leveraging your data, and you will hopefully get some ideas and takeaways to share with your teams, and perhaps some things you may even be able to implement yourselves. So let's dive in. For the longest time, people have been talking about engagement and getting a 360 view of your member, but what does that really mean?
So Julie, my turn. Can I introduce myself?
Yeah, we're going to go through a little bit of what structured and unstructured data is, how you combine all of that. What we're really going to be talking about today is getting that 360 view of your member, but we're first going to start with how you can listen to your members and what the voice of the member is and how it could be captured. And with that, Dave, please introduce yourself and kick it off.
I'm a little eager, I guess, Julie. I'm so excited to talk about me. So, and Julie, it's interesting you said we're going to make this as exciting as possible. It's a little bit of an oxymoron to have an exciting webinar, but you're right. We're going to do the best we can. So, folks, I'm Dave Will. I've been working in the association community for a little over a decade now. First, having created Peach New Media, and that's the Freestone learning management system is currently owned by Community Brands. And after selling Peach, I started Propfuel with my partner and fellow Peach, Cameron Abushan. Another Peach, Ryan Graham, is a part of our team now. Anyway, we're 2 years into this new venture, and we're just absolutely thrilled to be working with associations again, like we were with Peach. We discovered there's a gap in what we know about our members. I say our and we because I think of myself as an association professional. Even though Propfuel doesn't have members, I still refer to it as we, so forgive me if you hear that language. But there's a major gap in what we know about members, and it's related to capturing their sentiment, what we call the voice of the member. So we created this platform, much like a marketing automation system, but instead of sending out more content and stuff for members to read and watch and click on, we're creating feedback campaigns where we capture the voice of the member by asking these single questions over a period of time to a very specific group of people. And you're going to see a little bit more of that in examples. Ultimately, all this feedback, the voice of the member, results in a greater new member retention. Existing member engagement is improved all the way to regaining lapsed members and recruiting new members. Now, before we get into the content, because I like stories and I kind of like fun stuff instead of talking about feedback and data all the time, a friend of mine reminded me of the scene from Pulp Fiction, which I'm sure many of you have not seen for a long time. This kind of movie that kind of sticks with you. But a friend of mine reminded me of the scene where Mia Wallace, Uma Thurman, of course, asks Vincent Vega, who's played by John Travolta, and she asks him in a conversation. That's what she says. She says, in conversation, do you listen or wait to talk? And Vincent Vega in his mumble, sounds a little like Elvis, says, waits a long time. There's a long pregnant pause. He says, I have to admit that I wait to talk, but I'm trying harder to listen. I just love that scene, but it was so relevant. I had to put that into this thing. First of all, great movie, really fun. Gonna have to watch that again with my kids sometime soon. But that's what we've been hearing from you and your peers, and that's what we're are you guys judging me because I just said I was gonna watch that with my kids? That's what's running through my head right now, Julie. Would you watch Pulp Fiction with your kids?
I don't know. I was just laughing at your impression. Actually.
Thank you very much. But this is what we've been hearing from the association executives across the board, is that I have to admit, I wait to talk, but we're trying harder to listen. We're sending so much content. And so the question is, how do we capture that voice of the member? How do we listen better? And then, thanks to Association Analytics, and Julie, what do we do with that information? All right. So today we're going to spend a few minutes laying out the opportunity in front of us. We'll walk through the concept of capturing the voice of the member with a few examples, and then Julie's going to talk to us about the process of analyzing everything we know about the member, from transactional data to the more sentiment-oriented feedback. All right, cool. Let's jump into this. And by all means, I see James, you already asked the question. Yes, that's a great question. We'll talk about strategies to get your team on board with this stuff. And people are totally judging me for wanting to watch Pulp Fiction with my kids. So Julie, please do interrupt. If there's questions that pop up, sometimes I get a little focused on the slide and my topic. Feel free to interrupt if you can get a word in. All right. Let's start here. We all have this vision of the ideal member. And it's one that's participating in your community. They're volunteering, they're attending events, they're aligned with your mission, so much so that they actually become an evangelist for the association. They're advancing in their career and so on. I mean, all of these characteristics we've put together as, gosh, what does that perfect member look like? And some of these things, we already know their level of engagement through observation. It's data that we've been collecting. It sits in our AMS, but some of it's significantly harder to capture. Like, how do you know your members are aligned with your mission? Either way, we're on this quest to lure members to get more engaged so they look and behave more like this ideal member. So what do? We put relevant stuff on the website. We email them a lot with tons of stuff to choose from. I got an email from an association I belong to and I counted because I was very curious, 50 things I could have clicked on. And then the social media buttons at the bottom added another 8. There were 58 things I could have clicked on, but we send them newsletters and we send them publications. And all this, the member engagement tools and practices that exist right now are ways for you to provide better and relevant information and more content. And I've been hearing a lot about new member retention programs. It's all about drip campaigns and how to send more content to new members, more information, but it's tailored to the new member. So it's better, it's more personalized, but new member campaigns are often just more content. Member engagement has become about pushing out more relevant information, but information is ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And so we're pretty good at relevant content, but it's not a great differentiator for us, that's for sure. It's not going to get us closer to our members. It's not going to allow us to get to know them better. So what's missing?
Dave, real quick comment.
Yeah.
That's something that's actually really important to touch on that probably resonates with a lot of people in our audience, is sending too many emails. And so I'm sure if you're one of those, you might want to start a chat over there, but that's something that listening to your members and having this constant feedback campaign can help with, as well as data and analytics. So I just wanted to point that out because we run across that a lot.
I was at a great session. I'm totally lying. Somebody told me about a great session at MMCC, Membership Marketing and Communications. And maybe I had the M's backwards. But anyway, there was a conference, there was a whole session focused on emails. And the philosophy in this conference was not that we're sending too many emails. It's just they're not targeted enough. So, but that's a completely different webinar there. But I agree with you, and generally I think most associations would agree with you, Julie, that there's just too much stuff going out. And I think that's the point we're making here. So we're sending all this stuff, which is good. And some of it's really, really, really good stuff. But is it working to convert your members to make them look more like that ideal member? Well, I think most of us would agree that something's missing. And we all have these tools to talk at our members, but we don't have a really effective or scalable way to listen to them on a continuous basis. And this is where you get the emotional state of your members. This is where you really find out if they're going to renew or how you can help them. And this is what we're referring to as the voice of the member. So here's why that's important. If we're listening to our members, we're going to be able to get them more involved. And the data shows that engaged people by 90% more often, that's a crazy statistic, but the data shows that engaged people by 90% more often spend more on every transaction too. And the Net Promoter Score is this like single, I'm sure many of you know what the NPS Net Promoter Score is, but it's a single metric that identifies essentially who are your detractors and who are your promoters in your membership. Who are the people that are singing your praises and who's not. And if you can create more promoters, you'll see a dramatic increase in the lifetime value of those members. So that's why it's important to listen better. The listening is what allows us to create those stronger connections and ultimately drive people to that state of being the ideal member. So here's how most associations are listening. Once a year, every 3 years, talk to one association, where it's every 7 years. Actually, they're a client of ours now. They send a survey. And it's a terrible response rate, generally speaking, unless you really nag people, send it out 12 times. But the response rates are very, very low. It's a pain in the ass to do, to create. It's a pain in the ass to take. And it's a snapshot in time. The thing is, feedback's important when it's hot, not at the end of the year, when it's relevant. Surveys drive me completely nuts. It's a snapshot in time. It's a very small group of your most loyal members that are actually answering it too. And it's a good way to dissect your members, but that's what it is. It's a dissection. It's not actually listening to your members. It's not actively asking for feedback at regular points throughout the life cycle of the membership. And so that's why we've drilled down into these feedback campaigns, these categories. We're trying to identify what do we need, what groups of people should we help associations target through a feedback campaign. So when a new member is coming on board, I learned from one of our clients recently that new members generally are the most likely to open and interact with an email, but they're also the most likely to not renew. And by asking a new member a single question over the course of their first year, so, on a monthly basis, they receive another question that allows us to tap into their sentiment at this stage in the life cycle of their first year, we're much more likely to get them involved. And because we're capturing their sentiment, we can react to it before they choose to leave. So each of these bullets on the screen represent these possible feedback campaigns where you can target certain groups of members and to capture their voice along the journey. So let me give you a couple examples. I really like this one. So we're going to go into detail on this one. Then I'm going to skim over another one, and then I'm going to pass it on to Julie. This is the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Scott's the Senior Director of Membership and Business Development at NSCA. They have a handful of campaigns they're doing Propfuel, but the one I want to focus on, with their permission, of course, is the member retention and engagement campaign. Over the course of the members' first year and beyond their first year, it's a drip campaign. So as they become a member, it depends on what stage they're at in their life cycle. NSCA is asking one question every month or so to get a pulse of what's going on in their heads. For example, one of the first questions they ask is, and this is one of the questions they ask. One of the first questions they ask is, what's your main reason for becoming a member? And the member clicks right in the email. They click on this, and they're given the option then to offer some open-ended feedback as well. But because they can click on this right in the email, there's no button that says take our survey or click here to answer a few questions, or you pop them in front of 20 questions. They click on a button here, and because of that, they're getting a 33% response rate. It's the ability to click in the email, and the fact that one question drives such a high response rate. Over 10,000 members they've cycled through at this point, and they're averaging this 33% response rate, which is more than triple their historical survey response rates. So here's the really cool thing that Scott does, though. Not only is he getting these global trends of what's happening across the membership, but he's also looking at the sentiment analysis every week, and he studies the negative feedback. Of course, he likes to see the positive stuff too, but the negative stuff is what he drills down to. So he drills down into the specific answers in specific campaigns to target specific people, and that's how he's creating promoters out of detractors, one member at a time. So rather than guessing who needs attention or bumping into people by happenstance, he sees 32 people specifically in this scenario that need his attention. All right, here's another example that I want to touch on. EO is really interesting. They have 120 local members in this Boston chapter that's using this. And Ryan has come up with a really cool approach to using feedback for a learning campaign. Most of us send out evaluations after a learning event, right? That's kind of, you do the event, you do a learning event. Well, Ryan created a head and a tail to a typical feedback loop around these campaigns. The head is about getting people thinking about an event before it happens. Sending out a question 2 weeks before, another question a week before. Then the event happens, send out your evaluation. And then a month or 2 or 3 later, depending on when you want to do it, a month or 2 or 3 later, you ask an effectiveness question, which in the case of EO, they ask a question like, based on the topic of the event, is there anything you're applying to your day-to-day work operations based on what you learned in the event? In other words, what did you get out of it that you're actually taking with you? But here's a cool thing. They got some feedback in this campaign, one of their campaigns. They got a feedback and they responded. And this is kind of a very simple response that you can automate as well. You can automate some responses based on how they answer. But this is a response that they sent back to one of the members. And look at this response. This is verbatim from an email they received from one of the members. This email gives me hope. Must be the first personal email I got from the chapter since I joined Boston a year ago. Keep it up. So that's both good and bad. The bad is first response since joining a year ago, but the good part is look what they're doing now. And so here's the thing. Not all feedback is positive, and that's okay. Sometimes we get negative feedback, and sometimes negative feedback actually helps us identify who's not a good fit for an organization. And here's an example. I don't know if you've heard of the Alamo Draft House. They're based in Austin, Texas. Really, really cool theater from what I understand. I've never been. Food, drinks, beverages, adult-oriented beverages. No one under the age of 18 is allowed unless they take a course and a test, because they have a very strict cell phone policy. But because somebody broke the policy. They were texting in the movie. They kicked the patron out for abusing the policy, and the patron gave them some feedback. They left a long and possibly drunk message that went on and on. And I really encourage you to listen to this if you're not averse to hearing a few F-bombs and foul language, perhaps. But it's a really, really funny video on YouTube. Just search for Alamo Draft House feedback or phone call or something, voicemail, and you're going to hear this thing. But they got this feedback. It was quite negative. And in fact, the voicemail ended with this: "Thanks for taking my money, a-hole." And their response, because they want to respond to the feedback they're getting, their response was, "You're welcome, and thank you for not coming back to the Alamo texter." So with that, that's what I have to say about capturing the voice of the member. Julie's going to talk to us about, and in fact, Julie, I'm going to stop my sharing if you want to go ahead and share your screen, but Julie's going to talk to us about incorporating member feedback into the bigger pool of data that we have on our members and how we can harness that. So with that, Julie, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. And yeah, if you guys haven't listened to that, it's absolutely hysterical. And somebody also commented that there is an Alamo in DC. So I know we probably have a lot of DC people.
Very nice.
But yeah, if you like watching movies without texting and interruptions, I guess go to the Alamo, right? And I love the way that they totally owned it and used it. They should make t-shirts out of it. Hilarious. So let's talk a little bit more about data. This is something I'm certainly passionate about, and the more and more I talk to people, the more it's of interest to everybody. Data doesn't just live in IT anymore. Data is across our entire business. And so why should we care about this stuff, right? So Google's economist said the ability to understand and communicate about data will be the single most important skill in the next decade. So he's not talking about being able to write SQL or build visualizations, combine data sources, anything like that. It's really being able to look at data, understand, pull out insights, and act on it, do something with it. And that's really what's going to make a difference at your organizations. So this is the main issue that we hear pretty consistently across associations, and it's not just associations. This is an organizational struggle. There are Fortune 500s, all different companies that struggle with this. So 85% of organizations struggle because their data is captured and stored in disparate, disconnected systems. So if anybody's having some of those issues, start up in the chat, yes, I am. It's typically almost everybody we run across has data in different areas. So let's take a look at some of these different areas. So here we have the common tech stack for an association, right? And this might look very familiar. You might have a couple of these. You might have a couple more than we have listed here. So you have an AMS, right? A CRM, something where you're really capturing member data, doing member transactions. A lot of these are transactional systems. So you may have an event registration system, email marketing, marketing automation, an LMS, somewhere where you're keeping track of your donors and transactions around donors, a community. So this is a little bit different because here you're capturing also unstructured data along with the structured and transactional data that you're capturing in systems like your AMS. Certainly have a finance, an accounting system, and then the voice of the customer, some of the stuff that Dave was talking about. All of these should be combined to really get that 360 view of members. And you should be using a tool that's optimized for analysis. And so transactional systems are meant to capture and store data, and they're meant for operations. An analytical system is optimized for analysis. So here we have a poll. Are you listening to your customers? pull this up. Hopefully you guys can see the responses. So the first question is, do you have a way to interact and gather feedback from your members on an ongoing basis? And it's simply yes or no. So we'll give everybody a couple minutes to jump back to their other screen and answer the questions. And the other one is, do you have a way to bring all of this data together? Yes or no?
Hey, Julie, let me ask you a question while people are answering this. Do you find that this may be a really dumb question, but do you find that the sophistication of an organization's ability to do this stuff, to gather feedback from the members on a regular basis and to bringing it all together, is that just simply the organizations that are bigger and have more money, have more sophistication, and therefore can do it? Or do you see some smaller organizations doing this too?
So if you were to ask me that same question 5-6 years ago, I would say it was typically just the larger organizations. But now basically the price point of all of this stuff is coming down. So we see medium-sized, small orgs. I mean, we even work with Psychonomics, who has, maybe 2 employees. And so it's feasible for everybody at this point, which is really cool. Because I've always argued that a lot of times, well, I will say it's even across the board. I don't want to sway one way or another. Everybody needs it. It doesn't matter if you're small or you're large. You need a way to gather data, look at it, and make decisions based on it. And arguably, if you only have 2 people running an association, they are extremely strapped for time and resources. And so they're not going to have all day to analyze their data. So that was a long way to answer your question, but we're seeing it more and more now. So here we have the results of the poll. So the first one, do you have a way to interact and gather feedback from your members on an ongoing basis? A little more weighted towards yes, which is great, 56%. And then we have 44% no. And then a little bit more of a gap on the second one, which doesn't surprise me. Do you have a way to gather all of this data together?
I would love to, but if I could interrupt in the chat, if you don't mind, in the chat, guys, send us a little note. I'd be very, very curious. What is your method for capturing feedback on an ongoing basis? For those of you that, for the 56% that said yes, what is your method for collecting that feedback? Very curious to know that. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. And in the same for bringing your data together. I know some people might use different tools that Google has out, that Microsoft has out. Tableau has historically been a front runner in the association space. Love to hear what else you guys are using there too, but it's no surprise to me that 74% does not have a way to bring this data together. So let's talk a little bit more about that and actually show you guys how you could go about doing that and what it might look like. Begin with the end in mind. So really looking at what do you want to achieve at the end and what does that look like? So how are you making decisions today? And typically whenever we talk to people about this, it is through instincts, politics, and tradition. So you're making the decisions that you made this year based off of, you know what, we did it last year and it wasn't so bad, so we're going to do it again this year. Why rock the boat? However, we're starting to see more and more associations have maybe a decline in membership, or historically maybe an issue or a challenge with first year retention. And so we really need to be able to start to use data easily. That's the other part too. I do know a lot of associations that are using data, but it's not always accessible and it's not always easy. So just think about it. Think about at your own association, how are you guys making decisions? And typically this is how the process goes, and this may sound very familiar to you folks on the phone. So it might take days to prepare manual reports. So you're putting together reports manually, you're combining them, you have a lot of resources, and perhaps some of you on the phone right now might spend a large part of your day running reports and compiling them to try to find trends and analyze your data. That we hear all the time, and people don't really realize how much of your time is actually spent on gathering reports and manually combining data. So an incomplete understanding of member preferences and interests, something we all want to know, right? We all want to know what's most relevant. We want to be the most relevant to our members, and we really want to know what their interests are. And part of this too goes back to what Dave was saying about listening to the voice of the customer. We have different avenues of data that we described earlier. Are we really using all of those and capturing all of those? Can't get answers to questions quickly. Do you have somewhere to go to see your KPIs, your key performance indicators? And on a real-time basis, how are those fluctuating? What's trending down? What's trending up? What programs do you sunset? You know, we often have an entire program of different services, maybe books, maybe publications, and we don't really know what's profitable and what's not profitable. How can we better spend our resources and focus on the profitable programs? What content is most relevant? This is another great one. So content, this could be taken from your community. You might be able to see, you know, what are people in my community talking about? If you were able to synthesize that data, and that's unstructured data, start to synthesize that and really focus on what topics are trending up, what topics are trending down. You know, you might realize, oh, wow, we have on our website a bunch of content that our members aren't interested in. And you know that real time because they're talking about it. Or abstract submissions. They're submitting certain topics that, you know, you're not focusing on in an association. So some of these probably sound familiar to you. Certainly, most associations want to find new sources of revenue and find new target audiences. So we're going to start with a few basics and then build up to what data and analytics is today in the modern world of 2019. So what is data and analytics? The way we like to define it is it's data-guided decision-making that leads to action. So you never want to forget that piece of it. Everybody always wants to look at pretty visualizations and wow, that looks great, but you really need to figure out what action do you need to take away from that. And that's what's going to drive and make a difference and an impact at your associations. So before, this is what many of us are looking at, right? We live in the Excel world where we're looking at something that's manual, it's error prone, it's hard to change, and it's hard to interpret. You know, if I'm to ask you, hey, is our membership in China trending up or down? You certainly can't tell from here. Or, you know what, is our first year retention driving up or down? And do we have an issue? Do we have a retention issue? Or do we have a recruitment issue or challenge? Certainly can't see that here, right? And this is a lot of times what we're looking at, which is tabular reports. What we want to go to is something like this, where it's fast, it's relevant, it's actionable, it enables drill down, and really enables better quality decisions. So I'm going to stop on this one for just a second and talk about the 3 waves of BI or business intelligence. So if you guys take a minute and think about how are you guys doing data and analytics at your association? So the first wave was really IT to staff. So it's the operating model that I see a lot with associations, and it just doesn't work. This is where you go to IT, you ask for a report, you get it, and you know what? You show up at the meeting, and the other person you're meeting with, they actually have a different number. Usually, if I'm in person, I see a lot of head nods here, and it's like, yeah, that happens quite frequently. And then you know what? Even if you do get the answer you need, typically it just creates more questions, which is a great thing, but you certainly can't drill down to get those answers with a piece of paper, right? So then we went to the second wave of BI or business intelligence, and it was the analyst to staff. So now you have somebody who's a little more entrenched in the business and also can do the analytics side, but you still don't have self-service. You still don't have a way to ask a better quality question of the data, and do data discovery. And the third wave, and where we're at today, is end user BI. And this is for everyone. So you should be able to get a board report to an executive dashboard to individual business areas or departmental KPIs or metrics, all the way down to a member record or a registrant record. You know, come on, it's 2019. We should be able to do these things. And a lot of associations are now, which is fantastic. I think it's going to change the way we do business as an industry, which is what excites me and what is certainly my mission here in this industry. So a little bit more about data, and I encourage you to think about your association and what data that you guys have. So first party data, I'm sure everybody has these, comes from your AMS and systems that we talked about earlier, you know, event system, some of your transactional systems, your accounting system, your website, social media sites. Then you have second party data, which is data from partners or affiliates that's shared with you. And then more and more, we're starting to see associations creep over into this third party data and really get excited about third party data and combine it with the other data. So another trend historically has been the third party data all lived in research, which was very separate. And we would stand up an analytics department or hire an analyst in the business area, and the first party and second party data would be separate than the third party data. And now we're starting to see this all come together as one unit. We're really seeing the structure and the organizational structure of associations start to change, where analytics really covers all three of these umbrellas, which is really exciting. And again, just creates more efficiency with your resources. So diving in a little bit deeper to the types of data that comes out of all of these systems. So demographic and geographic. So if you're thinking about starting your analytics journey, you want to think about, and a great place to start is listing all of your data sources and think really hard, think outside of the box on what data that you have or you're collecting or that are coming into your organization. So demographic and geographic data. So income, education, age, gender, that's all falling underneath that category. Then you have behavioral, online interactions, search terms, website activity, online purchases, app usage. That's all behavioral data. And then you have psychographic, and the voice of the customer too falls underneath here. And when you're thinking about all of this too, it really takes combining all of it, because there's something called implicit and explicit interest. And what that is what people say they're going to do and what people actually do and how they actually feel about it are different. And it's not because we're dishonest humans. You know, I come from accounting and finance background, but I might check that a box on a survey saying, yeah, I'm interested in accounting and finance. But what I read about and what I do is probably vastly different than that. And so you really need to be capturing all of this different data and types of data from your members to really get a true 360 view from them. And then you have contextual. And a lot of these are publicly available. So you can pull in geography, weather, different time frames, different seasons. A lot of these probably really affect your events, which is a huge revenue driver for a lot of associations. So really considering all of those different types of data. And then going a little bit deeper here, we have unstructured and structured data. You may have heard me touch on this a couple of times, but what people don't realize is in today's day and age, it's 80% of data is unstructured. And so that's the data coming from your community, coming from the voice of the customer. And then you have the structured data, which is the data that you can kind of put in rows and columns. And what people typically think of analyzing is structured data. And you can see here, it's becoming increasingly more important to also include the unstructured data into your analysis. And breaking that down a little bit further so you can kind of see how this all falls together. So to get that 360 view that we're all looking for, we've been talking about engagement in this industry forever, and I'm sure we will forever. We're just figuring out better ways and using better tools to enable us to really get this true picture. But we want to be capturing the behaviors, the social, and the voice of the member, which are all typically unstructured data, along with the demographics and the transactions, which is the structured data. And I'm going to show you a picture of that in a moment. I think I'm going to get wild here and show you a couple of live visualization. So
I knew you were going to keep it exciting, Julie.
yeah, right. And this is really to give you an idea. When you talk about, think about the end in mind. A lot of times when we talk to people, they're like, oh man, I would love to be able to go in and slice and dice and get answers to the questions that I need. And so hopefully this will encourage some ideas, if you are already doing that, on different ways you can do that. So here's an engagement overview. I'll go through this really quickly and then I'll hop over to a live screen so I could actually show you how you could filter and what that means. And then a little bit of a case study as well on capturing the voice of the customer and how that really affects and drives engagement at this one particular association, actually. So over on the left, you typically want to have some KPIs, whatever is driving. So if this were membership, you typically have a count and then also a dollar, so revenue count of members and also revenue associated with members. So over here we have an average engagement score. That's what this is, the 42.15, not so bad. The highest score is 85, so that's interesting. And this is what's making up your engagement. And this is where you're bringing everything together, both transactional data and structured data and unstructured data. So I'm gonna click out of here. I know you guys, we're gonna go over to here where you can actually see, so this was data that was combined with some member data and some demographics, along with the data that came back from a campaign from Propfuel. So here you can see average engagement over time. And what happened in this time were campaigns. So questions that went out, real-time feedback that was coming back that you can actually watch as your engagement went up over time. In this case, particularly because of those campaigns that were going out and that connection that people were really feeling with this association. So pre-score and post-score, so this was before the campaigns and then after the campaigns, so you could see a significant jump in the engagement scores there. And then going down here a little bit further, you have the satisfaction with the association. So here you can you always want to be able to drill down and drill through so you can get an aggregate view of everything and then actually drill down to who those individuals are. So, right, you want to know, say you see, you know, a large grouping in one, you really want to know who are those people and what attributes make up those individuals? Is there a certain trend that makes them dissatisfied with our association? And then the same thing over to the right-hand side. Is there something in particular, is there a particular attribute that makes this type of member or this member very satisfied with us? And you know what, how do we find more of those? And then you start to get into the targeted marketing and the actionable items that can come out of data and analytics. So moving over to the right a little bit, so feeling a connection. This is really important. If we can tap into the emotional side of our members and really focus on that, you're gonna see retention rates go up. You're gonna see engagement go up. And you can see that down here where satisfaction versus member connection. So after the feedback loops were going out and the campaigns were going out, you see the satisfaction going up with the member connection. So really important. So that's an overview of everything. And then I'm gonna breeze through these so we can have some time for questions as well. So a lot of people hear sentiment analysis, and that is very simply how do people feel about whatever the topic is. And so typically you have neutral responses, you have positive responses, and you have negative responses. And that's sentiment around the responses. And so I would think everybody would want to know what that is, because you know, you might have everybody engaged, but are they engaged in a negative way, a positive way? And typically neutral is the largest pool of people. But in analytics, a lot of times you want to focus on those anomalies or those outliers and figure out why and what's driving those. And over here, you have the average sentiment by response. So you have what people are actually talking about here. Tops. That's another great way to look at different data sets, is figuring out tops and what's most important. So maybe it's your top web pages, your top topics in your community. Here we have top 25 positive responses and top 25 negative responses. So then we could really start to do something about this stuff. So response breakdown. So again, how satisfied are you? I think that's a great one to look at and dive into. So if I were looking at this, I'd probably dive further into the different categories to see who these people are and if I can make any sort of connection on why they're satisfied or dissatisfied. And not only that, what else are they doing with the association? This becomes very powerful when it's combined with all of the transactional data and other data sources that you're looking at. I'm going to show you that really quickly in a moment too. So how connected do you feel to other members? You have here the main reason, and this is really just pulling out text and putting it in an area that it is on a dashboard, excuse me, to show you in real time how your members are feeling and what's the main reason for them being there and being a member. And then what's your favorite publication? What's your favorite format of continuing education? So I'm hoping what you guys are sitting there doing is saying, okay, then what action could I take based off of this information, right? If you have everybody telling you which their favorite publication, dive into that a little bit further and figure out maybe you need to spend more resources on that publication, or maybe you need to focus on the others. You have to investigate a little bit and do a little bit more data discovery. And then quickly show you the respondent breakdown. So a lot of times it's interesting to see maybe what all you know, CEOs are talking about versus directors versus different areas. So if you're the Association of CPAs, you might want to see what different people are talking about, maybe in different geographies. And you can really start to do that with a tool whenever you have visualizations and you're able to break everything down to the lowest level of granularity. Age, that's a great one if you're capturing that information. So you can see who's responding, and maybe there's some correspondence of satisfaction in certain age group within others, also by gender. So I think you guys get it. And really the story here is having all of this available at your fingertips and being able to make decisions without having to manually go through and combine all of this data. Again, if you're looking at an Excel sheet, can't really make a decision based off of that, but we're required to in our positions, which is silly. And here, when you combine all of that, here, let me actually, I'm going to click right over to here and show you what you were looking at earlier, but in a live screen. So here's where you're combining everything. So you're combining transactional data, you're combining from your community, revenue, membership, events, and you can see the average score of your entire association is 44.93. But you might be really curious how student membership is doing, because you, oh, not that one. You have a gut, there, oh, let me refresh. You have a gut feeling that, you know, student membership is dropping off or declining. And maybe that's something that you always knew, but you know, whenever you have the data confidence, it allows you to then make some decisions around that, or present it to the executive team to support a decision that you've wanted to make for a while, or to your board to make a decision for that matter. So something here, and when I talk about the highest level of granularity rolled all the way up. So Cassandra Miller, we have our top customers over here, right? Cassandra Miller, we want to know exactly about Cassandra. So we want to be able to dive in and see, this is a really engaged member. This is the most engaged member we have. It's out of 100. She's 100 out of 100. Perfect member for us. What is she doing? And here's where it brings everything together. You can see exactly how many events, the recency and frequency of those, how much revenue she's spending, is she volunteering? Here's where you would have the feedback from the voice of that member, bringing it into here. And what you want to do then is find more members like her, right? So this is becoming increasingly more powerful for associations to really get answers and drive decisions, and hopefully will inspire you to either start an analytics journey and start a journey of gathering the voice of the customer. Or if you're already doing that, give you some ideas on different ways you might be able to visualize and bring that together and start to make some decisions based on that. So I'm gonna hopefully pop back over to our presentation and wrap it up and then open it up for questions. So listening to your members equals increased engagement. That was real live data that I showed on the first live presentation, in which it showed when you're capturing the voice of your member and non-members, that goes for this is actually just as important for non-members as well. You want to know what those non-members are doing. How are they engaging with you? And if it's a goal to make them become members, there you go. You pull down your hit list and you go after them. And then it's kind of fun because you could see in real time your membership increasing. Something that may be a metric or a goal, and usually is for associations. But it definitely equals increased engagement, which is, I think, in one way or another, what we're all striving to do. So leverage what you have. And I know I've said this a couple of times, but I want this to be a key takeaway. Consider all of your data, not just transactional. Think outside of the box. Think of the voice of the member. Think of call center data, which could be unstructured data, community data, website search data. What are people searching for? Stuff like that. So consider everything and really focus on bringing everything together to get that 360 view. So we have one last poll, and then we're gonna open it up for questions. So Brian, if you could open up the poll. It is, what did you find interesting on today's webinar? The voice of the member, data and analytics, both, or neither?
Man, Julie, there's so many good questions too. And tell you what, while people are answering this, can we jump into one of the actually, you know what? There's something while this is being answered. I'm not sure if you guys have a party planned. We got a party in Columbus on Monday evening. Go to theideaparty.org if you want to join us at that. That's Monday right after everything happens. I know we're both at booths. I just looked up our booth number. It's 1757. Do you happen to know your booth number offhand?
I think it's 1515, but we have a bright green floor, so you can look for that. And then I'd mentioned earlier to James on the chat, we're doing a case study with NCARB and WEF, and we do focus at ASA Annual, and we are focusing part of it on how to build the business case or how they went about building the internal business case. So check that out. I think it's on Sunday at 2 p.m. I'm going to say that. And then we also have a couple of other cool resources too that we'll send out to you, free resources. We have a data and analytics maturity model, so you can compare yourself to other associations. I know, Dave, you have a couple of resources, so we'll send those out to all of the attendees as well. And then we got the poll results back. So most people were both, which is great because that's what we were trying to accomplish. So 65% of folks were focused or were interested in both. So I hope you are leaving satisfied and with some takeaways today. And we're happy to elaborate on anything else. Here's Dave and I's contact information. Feel free to contact us directly. I have people who are always reaching out to us, and we try to do everything we can just to help. And so if there's anything I could do to kind of get your data and analytics journey lifted off the ground, I'm happy to, hopefully our sales guy's not on the call. I'm happy to give you some free advice on how
Yeah,
you can do that.
I know your sales guy. I don't think Mark's going to be happy with free advice. Julie,
That's okay.
we've got so many. Yeah, I guess you're the boss. You can do whatever you want. We've got a whole bunch of questions in just a couple
let's
minutes. So let
let's
me
do it.
throw one at you this right now. And I've been kind of organizing, trying to find the best questions to start with. This is one that was asked early on. What strategies do you have for selling these ideas internally? And I've got an answer to that as well, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. If people are seeing this and they're like, that's cool, but now I got to turn around and convince everybody on my team that it's cool too. What do they do?
Yeah, I would start with pulling together a core team, and that core team could be somebody that's interested in data across different business areas. So you typically have somebody in membership and somebody in marketing. Those are usually data-driven people. And then you have somebody in IT, and then you pitch an executive to have an executive sponsor. And this is what we typically see how it gets off the ground. And then you start with something small. Maybe you start with one assumption that you want to either validate with a visualization, or a lot of times you think you're going to validate it, and you know what, you end up finding out something completely different. So that would be my recommendation, is putting together a core team and meeting regularly about it, because a lot of times a business analyst is not 100% of a role in an association, especially when you're talking about mid-sized, small associations. They don't have the resources available to have full-time analysts. So it's really pulled together to get the movement started.
So the response I would give to that is, rather than selling the solution, address the problem.
Yes.
So the solution may be, oh, we gotta get a tool to bring all our data to one place, or the solution may be, well, we need a way to capture feedback on a regular. No, what you're selling is the problem. And the problem is, do we struggle with new member retention or not? Do we struggle with lapsed members and getting them to come back? Do we have a hard time with young members? And if you do have a problem with any of these things, that's when you turn around and now identify the problem, and that leads to a conversation about, well, what can we do to solve that? Ultimately, feedback and data, bringing the data together in one place, oftentimes those are going to be a part of the solution. There was another question. Here's a I think a very simple one. Can you connect MailChimp to Acumen?
Oh, yeah, I just answered. That's one of the main value that people come to us is we've built connectors directly with many different vendors. I think we're at over 100 at this point. So MailChimp certainly is one of them. Informs, Real Magnet, HubSpot, I mean, all of them. We can pull all of that data directly into Acumen. And so therefore it's real time, and it's combined with the real-time data coming from your AMSs.
I love that. And in fact, I love your use of the term connectors, because the word integration is scary to people because AMSs have destroyed that word integration. But we have the same thing, Julie. When you capture feedback through Propfuel, it can be sent off through connectors to all kinds of platforms. And so, yeah, integration or connectors is a given now. It is a given. All right. What are you, Julie, this is for you. What are your best practices for data coalescence? And the preface to this was an organization that switched from Access to AMS. They lost a lot of data. What should they be doing now to prepare for the someday when they actually can have a platform like this? When you get a new client on board, Julie, what is the best way? Give an example of what their data looks like, and that's really, really good data for you guys to play with.
Yeah, sure. So, listen, nobody's going to have perfect data. It's never going to be in tip-top shape. And what we actually find is people think their data is in worse shape than it actually is. And a great way to know where to focus your data is pull it into a system and visualize it, and you're going to see where you have data quality issues, because it's going to come up. It's going to come up as so many fields in null. It's going to throw off a different number. And so that's an easy way to know where to focus. Something else too, I didn't talk about it here, is data governance. And that is actually a foundational piece of what we do during our Acumen implementations, but something you can start on your own. Start to build. We have an ultimate guide to data governance, which is free. I'll make sure Brian sends that out to you guys as well. But on there's a list of artifacts, and you guys can start to do this yourself. Start to list all of your data sources. Start to list the flow of your data. Where's that data coming into, out of? Who are your data stewards who should be caring about that data? Again, it's not an IT function. IT does not own the data. The entire association does. And then those stewards could then start to care for the individual data, the way that it's being input, and then also the cleanup going back. And one other thing, I would think about how and what you're using it for. So we love, actually, associations are data hoarders. We love collecting all this data, but then we don't do anything with it. And then we think, oh my God, it's terrible, it's not of great quality. Focus on what's important, what's driving your organization, what are those 3 metrics, and what data do you need to continually measure those 3 metrics. Focus on that, and then clean up that data, and then move on to the next question. And so bite-sized pieces.
I know we're already over the hour. If you got to go, that's cool, but there's a couple more questions. Julie, do we have time for like 1 or 2 more questions?
Yeah, I think I was writing privately at some point. Somebody had asked if we connect with non-association vendors, and absolutely. So Salesforce, MS Dynamics, GP, a lot of associations have Great Plains, MS Dynamics. All of those are also, we're not just, so we focus our output and our product acumen on associations, but the data sources and databases can run anywhere from an Excel sheet to Salesforce.
So one question here from Genevieve. How do you guys gather the data to study the member sentiment analysis? There was another question that is somewhat related that I think we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. How do you include open text feedback into the more transactional data? So this is all a question about gathering sentiment analysis. The way we capture that in Propfuel is everything starts with a selection, something so that we get their feedback by clicking a button. And then that leads to an open-ended element. So and then there's a lot of ways to capture their activity levels that turns it into actual data. Like, did they answer yet? Did they answer at all? Did they answer the question, yes or no? Like that right there tells you something. There's some data there. The sentiment analysis basically gives you negative, neutral, or positive. So there's another variable that can be tracked. There's keywords and phrases that are identified that can be categorized as data as well. And then ultimately, you also have the individuals that you can respond to. But Julie, do you have anything else you want to add to about how you take this open text sentiment and incorporate it into the bigger picture?
Yeah, so I focused on the community a couple of times, and that's because there's usually, you're logging in as a member, so you can tell exactly who that individual is. So you want to focus on not only the search terms there, but the actual content and the aboutness of the conversations. You could do text analytics to pull out those trends in topics as well. And so that's a great area to focus if you have a community. Search terms on your web, that's another great one. You could see what people, or in your content library, you could see what people are talking about. I think I mentioned earlier abstracts too. If we have any scientific associations on, you can pull together all of that to see what the trending topics are, and using text analytics. And whoever asked that question, if you're an analyst, I can hook you up with one of our analysts, and they can kind of walk you through how and what the system does. So we do have a lot more questions. I don't know, Brian, if there's a way we could like copy and paste these somewhere if we get the chats and we can follow up afterwards with the individuals. I want to release everybody to their Thursday. I'm going to tell on Dave. I think Dave's going surfing after this, so I'm going to release the waves.
The waves will be there.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for joining today. It really looks like everybody was engaged, and I thank you for that. And I hope you got something to take away and walk back to your association with. That's really the goal here, is to educate and give you something to take back that's actionable.
Hey, Julie, thank you so much for hosting this. I loved being a part of it. And folks, if you're in Columbus this weekend, please stop by. I would really love to just shake your hand and get your feedback on what you thought about this event.
Yeah, definitely. Putting faces with names is always great. So you know what? I'm just going to lay it out there. We'll see you all in Columbus.